Thanks so much for taking the time for doing this, Dirk, today. I really appreciate it.
No, that's okay. That's okay. It's good
now
to
you're going to find out how
to...
it's done in the lower leagues.
What I really liked, actually, is that I come to your work really fresh. I mean, I love audiobooks. I've heard Hitchhikers. I listen to a lot of things like, Big Finish and stuff like that. But I come to this piece and to a lot of your work quite fresh. It's like your name's always kind of been in the ether, and frankly, I've just said to Matt, I'm scrolling down my Audible list, and I'm still scrolling at the moment. So I've just got I've got loads of stuff to fill my Sandman shaped hole at the moment. So really looking forward to it. And yeah, really appreciate you getting in touch with us on Twitter, and it's quite nice. Given what Matt tweeted, actually, it's quite nice that you're meeting your troll here, Dirk. What you said that time. Well, it's good. Stuff that news stories.
Have we started, by the way? Where is our start point?
Yeah, have we started?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm just blethering. It's generally how the podcast works. Really, it's just
love to chat, but
you've got a script, Steve. Focus on the script.
This will be in. Okie dokie. Right, we'll get rolling. Here we go then. Hello, I'm Steve.
And I'm Matthew.
And this is Audiobook Club, which we still persist in claiming, quite wrongly, is the world's only interactive audiobook review podcast video show thing. Take that as you will, but one thing you can believe is that we will do our best to recommend to you the finest audiobooks available for your listening pleasure. This episode of Audiobook Club is a little bit different, a little bit special, as we're joined by the man who we're confident to name the best audiobook producer in the world. And we're not alone in thinking this. Earlier this week at the Glittering Audio Production Awards Gala in London's glittering West End, our guest was awarded gold in the best audiobook producer category.
Retire the award. From now on, it should be called the second best audiobook producer after Dirk Maggs Award. That is my opinion.
Utter creep. So his name is Dirk Maggs, and he is responsible for bringing to oral life everything worth devoting 24 hours of your listening time to over the last 40 or so years. From Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy back in the day, as the cool kids say, right up to the very current genre-redefining Sandman series, all via Horrible Histories, Alien, Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel, the news headlines, Stephen Baxter's Voyage, the list goes on. Dirk, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Steve. It's very kind of you to have me on, and I really am very grateful for the award. It's not as I don't feel the build-up you've just given me is quite justified. In the end, it all comes down to years and years of practice, but it's lovely to have something to put on the mantelpiece.
Absolutely. I mean, here at Audiobook Club, we refer to the Sandman series as the biggest budget movies ever that you make for yourself in your own mind. I mean, we refer to you as the greatest audio producer of all time. And Amazon,
yeah, we said this before the award, Steve.
Yeah, we were saying that Dirk is the greatest.
Yeah, we said it. This award is just backing up what we've been saying. So we're very grateful that you're here, to be honest. And thank you for taking the time, in spite of the slightly awkward way we met each other.
When you said that we did gimmick casting.
Oh, even now. I mean, what were you thinking? I
am going to apologise profusely for any offence caused. I didn't mean that you had done gimmick casting. The quality of your work is not in doubt. The immensity of what you've achieved by getting Audible to invest this much money in a really top-notch production, the top-notch productions that you do is phenomenal. My concern was just, and I only asked the question, I said, is it a gimmick? Is it just something that that Audible and Amazon are putting out there to drag people in, and then it doesn't turn out to be like that? And I hope that we said out loud that it's not a gimmick, it's a wonderful piece of audio, and now all other audiobook producers need to raise their game and be as good as you. I hope that's what came across. It's very difficult to say that through the medium of Twitter, but yeah, no, we are incredibly grateful for having you here. We didn't mean to cause you any offence. Me and my big gob, I'm very sorry, but thank you for coming to see us and being so gracious, nonetheless.
This is quite possibly the most emotional podcast we've ever done.
Oh.
But the thing is, it could be seen as the most expensive gimmick you could possibly come up with, because, an A-list cast in an audio production is a rarity, unless it's a Neil Gaiman project, in which case I could go back to Neverwhere and say we had a room with James McAvoy, Natalie Dama, Benedict Cumberbatch, Sophie Okonedo, Andy Sachs, David Harewood, Christopher Lee. That was a pretty epic cast, and that was on BBC money. I think what we're talking about is something that attracts a cast like that, and that's the power of a great writer. And Neil is a great writer. He just happens also to be a really nice, cool human being. And I think that's what attracted the cast. But I think you made a valid point. You can throw all the money at the world at something, but then you've got to have the nous to back it up. And that's really where I have to step up.
Well, and look, the way I've put it before is that Steve and I basically tinker with an old Morris Minor in a garage. We're hobbyists. We never thought we'd end up speaking to you. You're the guy in orbit in the Star Trek Enterprise. We assume with a team of millions, but we know we can hear your voice in the work that you do. I mean, I'm throwing the script out the window, Steve. Later on, we were going to ask you about the transition from BBC to Amazon, because the BBC were the only people in the game before. And I don't think in the 1970s and 1980s, when you were predominantly there, there's stuff that couldn't be dreamt of, and I assume that most of the actors that you just mentioned were in the room not for the paycheck, but as you say, for the love of it.
Yeah.
Charlie Brooker said recently, he was on Have I Got News for You, and they had some hinky prop there, and he said, "What's this? I'm used to Netflix budgets." I assume now the BBC don't have the budget to do such things, or possibly the will, but it seems that Audible and Amazon do. Is that a fair way of putting it?
I think, if you'll forgive me, I think you're getting hung up on the corporate side of things here. And at the end of the day, we look at the paintings. This is not me making a direct comparison, but I'm just doing it for instance. But you look at the paintings of Da Vinci or Michelangelo, you don't think about the Medicis who backed them, or the Pope who did the Sistine Chapel, and I don't, unless I'm thinking of the Python sketch or the Secret Policeman's Ball sketch. And I think it's, for a start, Audible isn't Amazon. It is a subsidiary of Amazon, but Amazon don't reach down through Audible and tell us what to do. Audible was a private company launched by Don Katz, who was trying to make an audiobook service that would stream, and for good or ill, that's what happened. And it was a success, and Amazon acquired it. But the actual day-to-day nuts and bolts stuff is done by people who are very, very into audiobooks. They're not there to sort of, build corporate America or whatever it is. It's none of us are in there because we are, rampant capitalists, that we're there to make good art. And the BBC has always been there to make good art. And we've all joked about BBC money, the joke about what's a BBC suit? It has small checks. There's all these sort of gags. But no, I kind of feel the need to defend them a bit, because it's the money is important, but in the end it's the art that matters. And the fact someone like Benedict Cumberbatch, let us say, and or James or anyone comes into a job because they really believe in the job. If they're not there for the paycheck, they're there for the job. And I might add, in Benedict's case, not only are they there for the job, they will then, when the read-through is over, stay behind and help me wash up the coffee cups. That's the kind of people we work with. The fact that I can't see a downside to the medium I love and work in, and have over 30 years tried to sort of cut through the pack ice a bit to bring more people in behind me. If a big corporation wants to invest in what we do and can make money out of what we do, great, because that means there'll be more of what we do. That is my view of it. It's a necessary evil somewhere along the line to have, a sort of money-making activity, because the money that's made then provides the funding for what we do. And that's really the problem with people pirating stuff, because then nobody gets paid and nothing gets made. So I'm kind of defending it a bit. Sorry, I don't mean to lean into you so hard this early in the chat, but it was, what you were saying last time and what you're saying this time, and I totally get that, you then qualified the statement, which is, I totally get that. But at the same time, there is a lot of hostility. Oh, if it's on Audible, that's owned by Amazon, I won't buy it, or I won't subscribe, and so on. And people are totally free to do that. That's nothing wrong with that at all. But I worked for years at the BBC. I have the letters BBC written through me like a stick of rock. If you cut me in half, it's written there. I love the BBC, the best of the BBC, that sort of idealized national broadcaster that I'm, wherever you are in the world you think of. But I do think the BBC would never have had the budget to do, for example, Sandman. We did Neverwhere because it was a limited run. Sandman is huge. Neverwhere ran, 3.5, 4 hours? Sandman, the 2 series so far, run 24 hours running time. It's such a huge investment. The BBC can't justify it, whereas Audible can. So that's kind of really what I wanted to say.
No, and look, please understand that while BBC is written through you like a stick of Blackpool rock, it's lightly tattooed on Stephen Mye's outer epidermal layers. It's where we actually met, and the reason we're friends 20 years later is because we still ultimately believe in the inform, educate, and entertain, and the idea of doing the best that you can. And it's interesting that you refer to what you do as art. I wouldn't disagree with you. I think a lot of what, and I speak as somebody who's not technically competent enough to produce an audiobook. I would say some of the stuff out there is very much craft, but your work is a layer above and very much art. And as far as Amazon goes, I'm vision impaired, and after staring at a screen at the BBC for 8 or 10 hour shifts that started at 5 o'clock in the morning, where Steve and I met, I got home, and as someone who can't see very well, the last thing I wanted to do was pick up a book. I didn't read a book for 15 years. When I lived in London, I lived in Baker Street, where, of course, there was an audiobook shop, and I tried that.
Yes.
And there were, cases of 8 or 12 CDs, and they got used as coasters and frisbees in my 20s. And I don't know which order it comes in. Maybe you can tell us what Audible and Amazon combined did. But Steve and I were using the word before this when we were having a chat, but we used the word democratize the audiobook as a format, as a form. I mean, I would not have been able to listen to your work on demand until it was available. I wouldn't have had the inclination. In the last 5 years since I've downloaded the Audible app, I've listened to over 600 audiobooks, and one of them was not on Audible. So please, as much as I'm trying to put a little bit of grit there to try and bring you on. Please know that we come from a good place, and that we are genuine fans of the medium and genuine fans of the values. Is the a question I wanted to ask you is: do you feel? Is it just me being whatever the opposite of an early adopter is, a late developer? Do you feel that you're reaching a wider audience now, or is it just my imagination?
Oh, without question of doubt, we are reaching a wider audience now, because we have worldwide distribution, a deliberate worldwide distribution by a large multinational corporation, as opposed to accidental worldwide distribution because the BBC Sounds app works in countries other than the UK. The BBC's influence was and is, great, and its reputation is high. But the BBC is the British Broadcasting Corporation, not the WBC, Worldwide Broadcasting Corporation. Much as I think it'd be very cool if they were. Whereas Audible have a global reach, and they've got a promotional budget, and that's something that's not to be sniffed at.
Do you know what? Steve, I'm really sorry. I'm skipping all over our script. You please rein me in a minute.
I was just
got a question for you.
You have another question for you? Oh,
just one question. Do you smoke, Dirk?
I used to years ago. Used to very heavily. What? Do you want a fag break?
No. That's not what I'm saying at all. Steve may reach for his e-cheroot at some point. But I haven't managed to give up the weed yet, and particularly in Sandman 1, we just sat there in awe at the emotion conveyed with the noise of smoking. I had to wait till chapter 17 in Act 2.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? It really is a trigger when you hear a cigarette lit and pulling on a cigarette. It's such a weird thing that it still makes me want a cigarette. It's so weird.
It does, can we ask the behind the scenes question? Were there real cigarettes involved?
No, it's all smoke and mirrors. More mirrors than smoke.
It does. I mean, one of the things, so Dirk, my first introduction to the Sandman was, I mean, I was very fortunate enough to be able to go to France for a week in the car, and I had a week, and I had the Sandman. That was going to be me. That was me sorted out, and I put it on as soon as I was on the A16 off the ferry. On it went. And it was just at the point where I got to the first tolls, and I was on my own. So when you get to the tolls, you have to get out of the car to go and get the ticket, and then get back into your car. Just at the point when the Sandman theme kicked in, it was full whack, and there were literally a person in the booth to the left and to the right of me just looked up and just went. And clearly they obviously wanted to download it after all. But yeah, it was great. It was great. Essentially, I'd like to think I was sort of helping in the worldwide distribution of Sandman to people on the A16
sort of
at those
broadcasting in a very localized way.
Yeah, let me know if there are any legal issues with that, of course. But it was just a brief. I think it was in the 30-second limit. Clip.
I'm sure the Audible PR department will be thrilled with you. Thrilled. It's a shame, of course, that you weren't doing the French, playing the French version.
I know, but
yeah, you really didn't plan ahead, did you?
Brought across to me was, no, I didn't. No, it was very spontaneous, much like everything. Much as you can tell with this podcast. Actually, you can probably get the vibe. But what I did find,
shambolic.
Yeah, shambolic is certainly one of the many words we use every single week. But what I found was it just blew my head. It was like, and I keep saying to Matt the whole time, it is literally like going to the movies without the pictures. The soundscape was just incredible. The sound. We talk about the smoking in Sandman 2. You've got to create sound effects for very highly conceptual, fantastical things. And I mean, I saw a screenshot that you posted on Twitter of all the tracks you had on your screen. And it just looked like a magic eye picture. And with the sound effects, I mean, you had to, one of them that sticks in my head because it was just so freaking grotesque was, I think it was Morpheus is either Morpheus or Lucifer had to lock the flesh castle.
Oh, the flesh key.
The flesh key
in Act 2, yes.
And it's like, how? I mean, it was slightly nauseating, but it was extremely, like, that's exactly what a flesh key would sound like. But how did you go about, what sort of, how, can you talk us through the process of that and how you get, the idea of what a sound would sound like and how you go about achieving it?
I think you're talking about World of Silly Putty, aren't you, and stuff like that, really. This is often where the effects come from. And, actually, the Wilfredo Acosta sound designed that one, so you'd have to check with Wilfredo. But generally speaking, I tend, from Act 1, a lot of what I was using was stuff that I've recorded over the years for other productions and I've held on to. And sometimes I'll take off the peg sound effects collections like Pro Sound Effects and so on, because, you really don't need to go and there's enough to do producing this stuff and making the noises work in context. To go out with a bucket of papier-mâché and a plunger for a couple of hours is fun, but doesn't get, an episode mixed. So, it is always down to the fun part of doing this stuff is always the sound effects. And of course, once you get to a level like this, I get less and less time to do them. So I'm buying more and off. I'm buying more and more off the shelf. But that said, there have been times when in the past I've made sound effects for the old Superman and Batman series, which you did in the 90s. And then we used to rent a studio for the day, hire a studio inside the BBC and spend the day, doing a crazy bunch of noises.
It does that whole kind of messing about in the studio, at the BBC to create sound effects. It just reminds me. My first experience at the BBC was a work experience at the World Service, and literally that day, that's where I heard the small checks joke. Literally in the BBC club,
I've never heard it before.
It's seriously, no. It was nice to get that reminder. Thanks to that one, but it's absolutely true. But so much kind of creativity. It reminds me of the Radiophonic Workshop, and how they create things like the Doctor Who theme and the sound of the TARDIS with keys along piano wire and stuff like that. It's just so cool.
The thing about working in these corporations like the BBC and to an extent inaudible, but inaudible. It's very key. You mustn't put those two words too close together.
I'll write that down. Hold on.
It's the freedom to play. It's the ability to play. And my best times working for anybody is where you're given the job and then they get out of your way and let you do it. And at the BBC, I was going to say, when we were recording sound effects, I recorded the Paris studio for a day, which was our audience studio. And we were actually working in just a corner of it, but it was a facility. And when we could play. And I do recall when I was trying to get the sound effect, this is very Milligan, of a shovel hitting somebody's head. And the effect of the actual shovel just wasn't ringy enough. So in the end, we came up with the idea of maximum shoveling damage. So we rigged a mic in the middle of the stage at the Paris, and then Stuart Silver, who'd written this particular series, and I stood about 20 feet apart and threw a gong at each other. So ideally, the gongs would collide in front of the mic, and it really worked.
But that's the thing, isn't it? I remember working on an ad, strangely enough, for Cointreau when they're allowed to do booze on the radio at a much lower level than you. The Scotch glass we used didn't sound Scotch glassy enough, and we ended up using a vase, I think, at the time.
Yes.
It's the ability to make a mistake that helps you get it right in the end, doesn't it? It's like, that's not quite shovel on the heady enough, let's use a gong. I mean, it's that.
Yeah, you do. You have to scale stuff up. And what people don't, what people coming into the business take things at face value, and that's the last thing you should do. So, for example, they will think, I was trying to think what it was, but there was, for example, the old BBC sound effects where a dinosaur was, that lovely little man who used to do animal impressions, roaring down a glass tube, going like that. And of course, then you see Jurassic Park, and you see what Gary Rydstrom has done with it, and he's basically combined about 68 different animals, from badgers to hippos, and in the middle of it somewhere somebody's pushing a wardrobe across a unvarnished wood floor, and there's this huge sound effect. And it's this thing of never ever settling for the obvious. You have to expand it and so on. And there are so many times Sandman is full of sound effects which aren't what they said on the label. It's full of stuff, and so many times I have a real thing about footsteps. I absolutely can't bear artificial sounding footsteps, and so much of the keyboard Foley footsteps that people use sound like, I don't know, somebody tapping a nail in somewhere. It's the weirdest it's totally unsympathetic to its environs. And the best footsteps I ever recorded were at the end of a long day in Maida Vale 7 at BBC Maida Vale in 1990, when we were doing Superman, and I desperately needed some Foley footsteps for Lex Luthor, and in those days we were on reel-to-reel, so there was none of this digital lark. And I just ran in the studio with my boots on, my cowboy boots, which I usually wear, and just walked up and down a couple of times, and then ran up and down a couple of times on this parquet flooring, which was the flooring of the studio. Well, I have used those footsteps ever since. Those are so often Morpheus's footsteps. Yeah, they're all over. Every time James walks about on a hard surface, it's usually him. In fact, anybody. And the real joke is that is probably, if you were to time it back to back, those footsteps that I did, there's less than a minute. And they're individually probably about 10 seconds, run off, run back, shuffle a bit, and so on. Because they blend. And the fact that no one's ever called me out on them persuades me that they really do blend. So it's quite an interesting thing. And another thing, if I can elaborate about sound effects, is I think it's more like impressionist painting than photography. Because I think if you're trying to suggest that there are two people in a room, you want the feeling of physicality, you want that sort of impression that there's not just floating heads, there are bodies underneath, and they might scratch themselves or shift position or gesture to make a point. And that's another big thing for me, is I can wallpaper scenes with sporadic cloth movement on either side just to suggest someone's in the room. It's actually random, but it's amazing how often it just exactly fits the dialogue. And it's that kind of thing. It's that kind of being prepared to let go of the literal and go for the abstract, which then creates a world which people believe in. And I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but it's a cognitive thing that humans do. We hear stuff and our ears turn it into something, and the narrative, it all blends, if it's done well.
Yeah.
But there's also a bit where something I noticed about what you do is there's also a bit of, you mustn't throw too much at it. You're quite sparing in some ways.
Well, I worry about doing too much. That's my constant worry. In fact, I've just been listening and working on a mix of Song of Orpheus yesterday and today, and thinking, I've over-egged this. I've over-egged the music, the sound effects need pulling down. I did 9 mixes on the first act of Sandman before I was happy, and on the 11 hours of it, and when it went out on the 15th of July 2020, and on the 14th of July I did a 10th mix because I still wasn't happy, and that was just for myself. It's a sort of mania.
Wow.
You have your own version?
No, actually, my version is now out there because I have done a couple of fixes to it. We added new titles saying Act 1 and so on. So actually, that is now the version out there. But yeah, for nearly a year, it was my version on my hard drive.
So the version on my Google phone is an artifact and a rarity.
Well, it isn't anymore because everybody's got it, Matthew. So kind of not.
No, I've got the old one.
Yes, it is.
Early,
yeah.
So
or if you have the CD version. Yeah. Because it hasn't got Act 1 titles on.
The original white label version.
Yes, you do. That's very good. Yeah. And there were a couple of tiny tweaks we did.
How do we get that Antiques Roadshow? Keep that. I don't know how we do that. How do they don't do downloads yet, do they?
Blockchain. It's all blockchain these days, Steve.
Yeah, that's a lovely looking blockchain there, worth £500,000. Yes, that's right. Can we just maybe talk a bit more widely about your work? It's obviously we focus quite heavily on obviously the sounds, but you know your adaptations. I mean, would you be able to sort of go through? I mean, I imagine in your job, no 2 days are the same, and you're working on either a writing aspect or a sound aspect or whatever it might be. But you sort of go through approximately what your day or week sort of kind of looks like.
Well, it's funny, the evolution of the job, because when I was at the BBC, I was a producer, and a BBC producer is kind of the person who not only produces but then directs and then supervises post and so on. But the thing is, I started off as a studio manager at the BBC, so I was, a tape op, working or operating the soundboard and so on and so forth. So when I became a producer and was working light entertainment, quite often after news headlines, for example, we were recorded at a Thursday lunchtime. Then I would go back to Broadcasting House with the tapes, which we would edit that afternoon for transmission that night. And John Whitehall, or the late great John Whitehall, or another good SM would be in the room to edit them. And after a bit, I could save about half an hour on the edit if I did it myself, just because that was the amount of time I saved not telling John or someone, what I wanted to do. And, because they knew I had been an SM, they then were happy to go and have an afternoon having a cup of tea and reading the paper. So I started doing it myself quite early, even though I wasn't supposed to. It was, technically wrong. And then when we got into, I was learning digits, so I went to the Soundhouse studio in West London, where my dear friend, now retired Paul Dealey, and I did Superman, Batman, and so on. And I learned by watching Paul work with Pro Tools how digits worked and how Dolby Surround worked and so on and so forth. So having got all this information together, and also now writing much more than I did as a producer, because as a producer it was my job to bring on writers, and quite right too at the BBC. Now I'm actually, kind of generating my own stuff and so on. And then come the point where I leave the BBC and go freelance in 1995, and I've got a family, 3 kids, and a mortgage to pay. I kind of I realized I'd have to do everything. So I'm now providing the whole menu from soup to nuts, and cooking it in the kitchen, and going out and buying it beforehand. And it becomes this sort of factory where you give me the job at the beginning and I hand you a CD at the end, or whatever it was in those days, So, from being a sort of supervising people mainly sort of job, it became hands-on quite quickly, and then I ended up kind of doing everything from the writing part to the post-production part. And it's often occurred to me that it's pretty crazy to work that way, because really you never get a day off to think, and it's beginning to catch up with me a bit on Sandman, which is why now I'm beginning to become a producer again and delegate the sound design, as I have on Acts 2 and 3 of Sandman. So it kind of it's changing as we talk about it. But if I take a sort of typical project from the last 25 years, generally speaking, the first over a 6-month period, let's say, sake of argument, the first 2 months of the writing, then there's about, up to a month in studio. and then there's another 3 months of post-production and then delivery. And it's quite funny because I'm working, so I'm working on the computer in final draft if I'm generating scripts. Then I'm in the studio and pushing actors around and all of that stuff for a period of time. And then I'm back here and I'm trying to remember how the hell I work Pro Tools, because I've completely forgotten in that time, how did I do this? And so I have templates that I can always go back to. I remember where I was at that time. And it's a really quite amusing, in a sort of panicky way, to realize that I forget every other phase when I'm doing one or the other of these jobs. And so in the time before I'm going in with the actors, I'm freaking out about, oh God, I'm working with James next week, and James is really good and he really asks hard questions, and I've really got to be on top of the material. All of this happens, and then I worry about the Pro Tools, and then I go back into writing again. I think, now how do I get dual dialogue on this page? So it's kind of an experience of fear and trepidation, followed by remembering how I did it, and then more fear and trepidation by remembering how I did it, and so on, until the job's done. And then I'm worried about, then I've got to find the next one.
Well, this is it. It's like, after we know that when we spoke to you in September initially, we knew you were working on Sandman 3, but surely you've got to be deciding at this point what you are going to spend that 2 months writing next. And I don't believe the 2 months of writing. I'm sorry, Sandman doesn't feel like it only took 2 months to write. And there were 102 members in Act 2's cast. I counted.
Yeah.
Where do you get are you doing both of those at once? Are you juggling all of those at the same time on different jobs?
Yeah, pretty much. But because I know what's coming next, and it's not always Sandman. I've just done Starship Titanic for Radio 4. But that was a one-off written by someone else. I just came in and pushed the actors around, and I did a bit of sound design, because Sandman's all with the sound designers. But yeah, what was the question?
Can't remember. 102 cast members.
Oh yeah,
what comes first? Was it you and Neil Gaiman sitting in a pub going, you know what, we should get James to do this? How does that work? Do people audition for you? Do you audition for them?
It's a combination of factors. Generally speaking, at the level of James, if you offer James a job, you want him. I'm sure he would read, but because he's a thoroughly good guy. But no, by then we knew who we wanted. And it's a kind of a balancing act. There's the lead actors where you know exactly what you want. There are your ensemble cast actors where, for example, I will immediately offer Kane to Michael Roberts because I know his Vincent Price impression is spot on, and that's what the part needs. And I know that Kerry Shale will absolutely ace Abel. I have a fairly shrewd idea, and I also know that Michael and Kerry have a number of other voices each. And I ended up on the ensemble recordings from the first series with a sort of Swiss Army knife cast, a core of about 20 to 30 actors who I know can give me 3 or 4 solid voices each that are completely, sort of separate from each other. That the ensemble cast on Sandman is the magic key in the Lock of Dreams door. That's so cheesy.
It's staying in.
Yeah,
would be if I said it.
And then the lead actors, that comes down to some educated guesses sometimes, and it comes down to absolutely knowing. For example, with James, it was like, James is absolutely right for Morpheus, he will ace it. My slight worry was that because he played Richard Mayhew in Neverwhere, I kind of, it was a bit like Crossing the Streams in Ghostbusters slightly, that we already had cast James in a Gaiman lead. But James is so good, and he's so very, very, when you get to the level of James and Benedict and actors like that, they are really sensitive to the material, and they really know how to drop themselves into the pond without creating unnecessary ripples. I'm inventing a metaphor that has no actual ending there, but James is fantastic to work with, and he's such an instinctive and good actor, and he asks such hard questions that, you know, I'm on my mettle with him, and that means that we have really rewarding but exhausting sessions. We're both wrung out by the end of them. And on this particular job, so on Act 2 and Act 3, which we kind of recorded back to back, James was the last person we recorded on Act 1, and he was the first person we recorded on Act 2. And then I would have a session. I think the order of sessions was James, and then I'll just get my diary, actually, I could probably find this, but James, then Kevin McNally, who was Wilkinson the Rat, which was great, because I love Kevin's work, and it was so great. This is the best part for me, is working with these people. Yes, so, you know, it was James, Kevin, and then we were in with the ensemble cast for Game of You, which was great, because it was basically about 6 people, which was great. It was the girls who share the flat, and, you know, the upstairs neighbour George, who's weird, played by Joe Dooley brilliantly. And we managed to work a way of getting ourselves into Soundhouse 1, which is the big studio, where we could all be in the room, and we had a second studio next door with a video link. So we'd actually get COVID-safe recording of up to 9 people. And that, for me, is the vital thing. Whenever we do Sandman or anything, whenever I do anything, I try and have all the actors in the same room with eye contact, or at least, you know, sort of a sense of physicality, and you're hearing them in the room as well as through the mic. And above all, standing up, because the energy level standing up, I'm standing up as I speak to you now, I work standing up, because you need to have that kind of, I don't know, holistic body voice thing going to really make it convincing. So I'll only sit an actor down if he's Sir Christopher Lee and he's 90 odd and infirm and still sounds good. But apart from that, generally speaking, get them standing up and have them all in the same room together, get the eye contact, and then the thing comes alive. And one of the great things that happened on Act 1, less on Act 2 because COVID really had hit us. Act 1 we recorded before COVID started, really. And what we had was the ability to do whole episodes in a half day. So, for example, A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was huge, we did on a Friday afternoon. And I'd padded out the script, if this is the right word, with Shakespeare. I padded Neil Gaiman out with Shakespeare in order to have the play within a play going on in the background continuously, rather than dotting in and out of it, because you're never out of earshot of the action. And that was brilliant. And we actually had what was effectively a live performance of that and several other of the stories in the studio in the afternoon. And I was saying to Rowan, the engineer, God, we could sell tickets to this. It would really be good.
Is there a secret mix down of just the Shakespeare that you can sell on the black market?
There is, actually. Yeah, you could almost put the play together. And I've got to say, there's some bloody good actors doing it. Don Gillet and Ray Porter, who does a lot of Shakespeare in America. You know, Ray, who did Dark Side in the movie, the Justice League movie, the Snyder Cut. And Ray is a Shakespearean actor, an American Shakespearean actor, and his Oberon was to die for. His line readings were gorgeous. I tried to kind of let them pop up, you know, in between Morpheus and the real Oberon chatting.
But it's there. Yeah. You have it.
It is there,
you can sit back on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, wait, if we remix all this into Dolby Atmos, I'll send the whole play up the back end or something, you know, so you can just sit at the back of the room and enjoy Shakespeare.
By the way, speaking of releasing things, I mean, the soundtrack is just incredible on the whole Sandman, Act 1, Act 2. It was just like, I mean, and you produced this during COVID and everything. How did you get the orchestra? It's just phenomenal.
Well, they live in Jim Hannigan's loft, I think, probably is the best. Yes. it is a virtual band. It's a virtual band, but thank God, modern day samples are so amazing. And when you've got Jim is a genius, I think. He's a fantastic composer. I'm sorry about the accompaniment, by the way. My own orchestra is playing upstairs. It's called Serenade for Solo Drill in Bathroom. It's a new work. It's rather monotonous.
Get that down. Get that down for the.
I don't know. You got the mix. You got the mix perfect. I don't know how you did. You're a genius. It's just the right level. It's very convincing.
That's me.
Even the plumbing. Just to sort of look at the, if we can have a look at the writing side of it and the audiences.
Good. That's the question I was going to ask too.
Yeah, and this is basically we've been attempting to start the plot of Act 2 in Sandman, and as with the first Sandman, it begins with a big story focused around Morpheus. There's essentially a real estate dispute over hell, pretty fair to say, maybe, involving sort of Norse gods, Egyptian gods, fairies, chaos and order. And just thinking about the audiences, you have these audiences who are obviously, firstly, you've got people who have read and devoted to and passionate about the source material from Neil's work with DC Comics, and then you've got people like us, and certainly me, completely new. So a blank canvas in their head, essentially. Are you conscious of that when you're going through the adaptation process?
I'm very conscious of the audience when I'm adapting something, yes, very much so. And I've been since the beginning, because I started doing stuff that had a potentially large audience in 1988 when we did Superman on Trial. So, I'm immediately, you're immediately making product which is familiar to a lot of people. That only got worse when Douglas Adams asked me if I would bring The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy back to BBC Radio, because Hitchhikers comes with this huge, cohort of committed, die-hard, quite fanatical fans in some cases, who many of whom were very unhappy that it was not being made by Douglas and Jeffrey Perkins, quite apart from the fact Douglas had horribly left us by that point, and Jeffrey would never have come back anyway because he was in television, or indeed that the first episode of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was actually produced by Simon Brett. But, nevertheless, people like things to stay where they are. And so that was a challenge. So coming to the Sandman was daunting on some levels, because obviously I know how special it is to people. It's special to me, and Neil is a friend and special to me. But at the same time, if you're tasked with wrestling a tiger to the ground and tying a bow round its neck, then you use whatever means you have to use to get the damn thing on the ground and tie a bow on its neck. And so with Sandman, originally my plan was to slightly homogenize storylines and to smooth out some of the anachronisms that 30 years later sort of apply. Not that there are many. I mean, God knows Neil wrote something which is incredibly far-reaching in terms of foresight. I mean, it's a Douglas Adams level of awareness about social change. The whole business of LGBTQ and all of the other stuff, T and all this stuff. Neil is there way before anyone else. But what changed my approach? I tried to invent something which is totally loyal to the original material, but totally true to the medium I'm working with, and tells the story in such a way as people who are not familiar with it can quickly get clued in. And one of the things about Sandman, it's very episodic. It was written as a series of the original 75 comic run. Is, there are groups of stories like Season of Mists, then you'll get one-offs like August, Thermidor, 3 Septembers and a January, then you go into another series like Brief Lives. It seems random until you get used to the fact that Neil will write short stories and then he'll give you a novella and then he'll go back to short stories, and all you know is that the common factor is Dream, Morpheus, the Endless, and their effects on human lives. What changed my intent to slightly smooth that out and foreshadow some things and change others was the announcement of the Netflix TV series of Sandman. That immediately made me reassess where I was. I got about halfway through writing the first episode of Act 1, and I just scrapped it and went back to the beginning again, because I realized that I could not diverge too much from the comics, because I knew the Netflix series would. The Netflix series would reinvent stuff. No matter, they'll make it, it's going to look amazing, and I think it's going to be amazing. The casting is superb. But it's television, and television changes things. Inevitably. It's a committee operation, and there are political forces at play, and so on. And it will be brilliant, but it will be a new version of Sandman. I realized I had to go back to absolutely core motherlode Sandman, the comics, and do much more of an audiobook than an audio movie, if you will. And thus, I had to rework how I was going at it. And if I was then going to cleave really closely to the comic books, it seemed to me the best thing to do would be then to work from Neil's original scripts that he wrote for the artists, so that we had the voice of Gaiman inside the brain of Gaiman as Neil Gaiman is writing this. So it's as if we're sitting next to him in the hotel room, on the airplane, in his home, as he writes it, and we are seeing the images come to life out of his head, because that's what we're hearing. We're hearing him tell the artists, Morpheus is tall, he has chalk white skin, his eyes are like black pools with stars in his shock of black hair, his long black robe has flames around the edge. You know, you're then getting that. And it solves a lot of problems, because it means that Neil is taking you by the hand through it. And of course, that really helps, because Neil and I always have discussions about, is a narrator desirable? Because I tend to avoid narrators in a lot of my work. I'm not averse to them.
I've heard you say that. Voyage, I listened to the interview after that. You said that.
Yeah. You
feel it's a cliche to have a narrator. But isn't Neil Gaiman, there's also a bit where he's almost like a god in this mystical universe
well, you're hearing the creator, aren't you?
Not a god.
The creator is actually commenting on, he's describing his creation. And it's Neil. And when Neil said, do you think it would be okay if I narrated it, or do you want someone better? I just said, come on, give me a break. Of course, you're the only person who can do this. That made a lot of difference.
Creator of the universe. Yeah, literally.
Creator of the universe.
Yeah.
Our discussion about narration is always friendly, and we both win around now and then. Neverwhere has no narrator. Stardust, which we did, is very much narrated. Good Omens, our version that we did 7 years ago, is Agnes Nutter has a more active role introducing each episode. Sandman is very hands-on narrated by Neil, because that means we are doing an absolutely true and accurate, a nice and accurate portrayal of the Sandman. And that way, there is clear water between us and what Netflix do, because Netflix can then go and have a female Lucifer, a female Lucian, change gender, change premise, move some of the chess pieces. The Scottish Norse gods, that was an easy decision.
You know, David Tennant does quite a good English accent.
But that was the point. You only ever hear David doing English accent. So why not have him Scottish? And you'd already had Mitch Benn play Thor in Hexagonal Phase of Hitchhikers, my dramatisation of Owen Colfer's book. So I thought it'd be nice not to have a cod Nordic voice. So, and of course, Bill Nighy's wonderful. So, yeah, that was, that's one of those things you can do, which is within canon.
Sandman Act 2 is harder work than Sandman Act 1, certainly at the beginning. In Act 1, you build a world that is referenced to things that we can understand. Steve always mentions Whip's Cross. I go back alleyways in New York or dingy offices in 1920s England. You ask more of the listener in the first 3 or 4 chapters, and I was... And that means I can go back and listen to it again and understand. And Steve as well listens to the first thing again. I was waiting for Bill Nighy to come along. I was looking forward to hearing him. And I've tried to write this down in my script, but I knew from that first, that satisfied noise or one makes when having a cup of tea, that is the first thing you hear of him. And you just know it's Bill Nighy, don't you?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good actor, isn't it? That's, you know, it can make a sip of a cup of tea memorable. You're in.
I'm conscious we need to wrap with you and let you go, because you are a very busy man, and obviously we want to listen to Act 3 as soon as possible, Dirk, of course.
Right, I need to get back to the Song of Orpheus is all.
You have to get... Exactly, yeah. So just very quickly, just a couple of things, if we may. Very briefly, I mean, obviously Act 3, you know, can't wait for it to happen. Any idea when we might be able to hear Act 3?
Next year is all I can say.
Okay, that's grand. And also just one final thing. If there an audiobook that you're listening to for pleasure right now, because we always like to go away to the next episode with what we're going to do, what we're going to cover next. And so if there's one that you particularly enjoy, particularly like, then we'll go away and do that one next time out.
Well, that's very good. That's a hard one, because it's kind of a busman's holiday for me to, to listen to stuff. I'll be absolutely honest with you. The last thing I do is listen to stuff.
What made you think you could do this job then? What made you so young Dirk? What made you want to pursue this career? If you can't give us one you're currently listening to.
Oh, I can tell you loads of 1,000. There are 1,000 things. There are. I mean, you know, first of all. And I was talking to Michael Sheen about this, because he was just about to do it at the National. It's Under Milk Wood, the original Dylan Thomas, the Richard Burton version from 1953, which is just voices holding you in a magical place. It's totally riveting, and it's so simple, and it's just beautiful. And the language is use of words. Under Milkwood by Dylan Thomas, the original Richard Burton BBC production, that I would definitely recommend. And then after that, it was the world of comedy, because my father loved radio comedy, and so we would listen to, in the 60s, he would have Round the Horn playing on a Sunday lunchtime with Kenneth Horne and Kenneth Williams and Betty Marsden, Hugh Paddock. And it was those worlds. And then I discovered at the same time, my dad wasn't a fan, but I became a huge fan of The Goon Show because of the imagination of Spike Milligan putting all those elements together. And I happen to also love big bands. So you've got a big band, you've got comedy, you've got Milligan, Sellers and Seacombe, and you've got the best sound effects ever. And it was a real privilege to, back in 2001, for the 50th anniversary of the Goons, we actually did a cardboard replica Goon Show at the Playhouse with Harry Seacombe's son, Andy, playing his dad, and John Glover playing Spike, and Jeff Holland playing Peter. And we had John Wilson's orchestra, live effects on stage. We had Chris Timothy announcing, and we had Lance Ellington singing. And it was really interesting because it was like archaeology. We had classic Milligan script material. We had the band, we had the sound effects. We had a cast who I didn't employ because they could look like and sound exactly like the originals. What I had was a cast of 3 people who could get the damn script over to the audience. That was the important thing. It didn't need to be a really great Blue Bottle or Eccles. No one will ever have that the spirit of Milligan and Sellers that informed those, but it's still very funny stuff. And what was brilliant, and this is something that I take to every job I do, is that you've got the script by Milligan, you've got John's band playing the Wally Stott, Angela Morley cues, you've got Rebecca, the spot effects operator, on stage doing the noises, and you've got the guys with the script, and you put them all in a theatre, and it's nuclear fusion. It rocked. And I remember Barry Cryer and Dick Vosborough walked in, and Barry said, "Hello, Dirk. We've come to bury you, not to praise you." And I said, "You bastard." And so he swanned into the auditorium, and I went out on stage, and I was shaking like a leaf. And I did far too long an introduction, but I was trying to thank everybody, you know. And Spike couldn't come because he was ill, and Harry couldn't come because he was ill, and Norma Farnes didn't come, and the controller Radio 2 didn't come. And I thought, oh, Jesus. But we did have a room full of people, and we had kids in the audience. And I'm just telling you the story. I did the warm-up cold in front of the tabs. The main tab was down. So all they could see was me and three mics. They didn't know what to expect. But I could see Steve Punt and Mitch Benn sitting in the front row, you know, and I thought, oh, Jesus, I'm going to die. And so I went through my intro, which was far too long, and I could hear Andy Secombe going, "Hurry the fuck up," from the wings. And then I finally said, and this is what it was all about. And as I said it, Steve Springfield, who was on the tabs, Celador Steve, pulled up the tabs really fast, and John and the band went straight into that Goon Show medley at the top of the Goon Show, up from the Goon Show records, you know, kind of medley of all the hits. And it was fantastic, because if you've never been in front of a 22-piece big band, if you're within 50 feet, generally, that's a loud noise, you know. Rock bands are loud, but big bands are loud too. That's a movement of air right there. And it was wonderful, because I marched off stage, but I was keeping an eye, and the whole audience just sort of went back in their chairs as if we'd accelerated, you know, into takeoff in an aeroplane. And from that moment, the thing flew. And this chemistry of Spike's script and the band and the guys and Lance singing, and we had a harmonica player to do a Mex Geldre number. It just flew. It was amazing. I didn't think it would work, and it worked. And it can still be heard. It's on a CD set called Goon Again, along with my documentary for the 40th anniversary. But it's my proudest day. And Jeff Holland and I always agree that if we were going to have a Groundhog Day, it should be that one.
Yeah, that's a story right there, isn't it? To keep, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. We've kept you way. You've been so giving of your time. We really appreciate it. We know you do that. We know you always give your time, because I've seen so many interviews of you on YouTube and everything. So really appreciate it. And obviously you've got to get back to producing the good stuff. So thanks so much for your time. Then just very briefly, of course, we've got Starship Titanic, which I saw you tweet about yesterday. Coming out at Christmas on Radio 4.
December the 19th, 3 o'clock.
So, yeah, really looking forward to that. And so, once again, many thanks for your time, Dirk, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon when Act 3 comes out. Can't wait.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Matthew.
Beautiful Anonymous changes each week. It defies genres and expectations. For example, our most recent episode, I talked to a woman who survived a murder attempt by her own son. But just the week before that, we just talked the whole time about Star Trek. We've had other recent episodes about sexting in languages that are not your first language, or what it's like to get weight loss surgery. It's unpredictable, it's real, it's honest, it's raw. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.